Hi, and welcome to Inside Out of the Box Marketing Success. I am your co-host, Chris Zullo, and I am joined by...
Hello, I'm Karmel James.
And we're here to take you through the 5 emotions of the characters of Inside Out. And we are going to take you through the overview.
And so before we embark on this journey, here are some of the different stations that we're going to stop on this roadmap. We will cover some of the common themes that email marketers encounter before we actually roll up our sleeves to get started in a workshop, followed by closing out on some additional resources that help you on this emotional roller coaster. Now, no trip can start without mentioning the Salesforce safe harbor, which is that we do not own any of the gifts that you're about to see.
And let's meet our highly emotional and opinionated team. We have joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. They're quite a diverse group, and together, through their teamwork, they make the dream work.
And so to get started, we are going to stop at our first station, which is process. When it comes to starting any marketing project, you often start out by planning your process, which inevitably is going to lead you down to a road of making nothing but decisions. You start out with identifying your audience, which then leads you to your messaging. Is it right for those audience? What's the right call of action? Should there even be a call of action? Are we focused on a majority of our network, or have we actually just decided to focus on the 20% of fringe cases? And then, of course, are we automating? Do we need to automate? When are we automating? Does it fit into our content calendar? I mean, all of these questions can soon lead you to just feeling decision paralysis. And like sadness, you're just lying there on the floor, unable to put one foot in front of another. So when you do reach this stage, it's best to just take a deep breath and start at the end. Pick a date and work backwards in your timeline to help you streamline the decisions that need to be made. It'll provide you clarity and ultimately lead you to the question of to automate or not to automate.
That is a very good question. Now, just because you can doesn't mean you should at least automate everything. So when thinking through which processes we should automate, let's start simple. Quick and simple processes can add up to a lot of time saved, and you'll be able to ship sooner. Larger, more complex automation deserves a bit more time, thought into the process. So regardless of the scope of your automation, it's a good idea to map out that desired process through a design document. It can start as simple as on the back of a napkin, notebook, doesn't matter, whiteboard, whatever works for you. Just start by just fundamentally sketching out what the process should look like in theory. And then we can revise it if we need to. And more on this later. Now, make sure you collaborate with the appropriate team members and ensure that we're not missing any details. Looking at you, sales and service and marketing, let's talk more. Once an automation is live, let's schedule a review to sit down the road a little bit on an ongoing basis to assess and reassess its efficiency, tune it up as needed. As anyone who drives a vehicle, you have to do your MOT on a regular basis. Otherwise, it's not going to stay functioning. So, whether you're driving a car or on an aircraft, now me personally, I'm not getting on a plane unless I know that it's being properly maintained. So while I love to travel, not getting on unless I know that for a fact. And so, excuse me, with that, I want to make sure that's always tested. And that's the next major point you should be aware of.
Yes, because without testing, how do you know if it's well maintained? And of course, you're thinking, the dreaded, time-consuming, excruciating, iterative process of doing the same action over and over and over and over and over and over. And I'm pretty sure that that is actually just the definition of insanity. And do we want you to go insane? Actually, yes, just like a little bit. And so while it's disgustingly painful, it is absolutely necessary to go through iterative testing. I know that when I first started out, I would always take the happy path method, taking the exact steps that I know are going to give me the results that I'm expecting, because that's how I designed it. But when I did this and I focused less on those edge cases, the cases where my audience is going to be doing things that I wasn't expecting, it actually created a risk of failure, because suddenly it's left up to chance about how they're going to engage with that material. And so while we're all a fan of A/B testing to determine if the messaging or the call to action is stronger, have we considered what happens if you click these links out of order? If I go to the call of action first and then click on another content link, are we still seeing that that engagement is tracked? What about if I forward this to another email address? Are the results still the same? Am I still seeing that same information come in? And so it's really important to do iterative testing especially when you're automating something, so that you know what to expect. As you're developing these different test scenarios, you can think about taking one variable and keeping it consistent while everything else gets to change, or put it in reverse, keep everything else the same and then only change one variable at a time. Doing this allows us to have more accurate results that we ultimately get to analyze.
And speaking of analyze, we know how red some people can get when they don't see what they're looking for, or the results aren't looking the way they expect them to, or frankly, they don't get any results because you don't have any analytics in place. So to keep ourselves and our colleagues from blowing their tops, we need to start somewhere. So let's keep it, again, in the idea of keeping things simple. Let's start by setting a target. So whether you have been doing this a while, you have some reports, or you're just getting started, let's take a deep breath, as we mentioned earlier, and keep it simple. Let's set a target, and then it's an iterative process. This is just like automation, the process automation. It's not set and forget. Reporting is a living, breathing activity, and we need to review, revise, and learn from it. And so we start by setting that target. We then measure it after whatever set period of time, whatever your life cycle is. If it's days, weeks, months, some cases it takes a year to get, from start to finish through, some of those larger processes. We need to be aware of what those timelines are so we can measure it effectively and accurately. And what we're trying to understand is it telling us what we thought it was going to tell us? What new information or different information are we getting that we weren't expecting? And then what do we do with it? Once we've looked at that and understood that, now we can revise and recalibrate. And so after we understand, that's when we can then, lean into the positive results or scale back from the negative results. And again, similar to, it's a recurring, theme here. Revise, revise, revise. Okay. Everything can go off track if it's left alone for too long. So we want to make sure that while we are reporting, we'll make sure we're reporting on the right information, the right people are getting the information that they need to make informed decisions. So it's vital that you set those benchmarks, understand what your KPIs are, what do we think is important to us, and then what is the data telling us we should actually be paying attention to. And so once we've done that, let's also make sure we document it so that we know why we went down that path in the first place and kind of where we are now.
Yes, because your future self will thank you. I don't know about you, but I can't even tell you what I ate yesterday. So documentation is extremely important when it comes to measuring the success of your campaign. I mean, think about it. How are you supposed to remember exactly why you decided to do an A/B test on the campaign in the first place? Or are you exactly certain that you wanted to see that the metric was increasing by 10%? And also, who were the people that were involved in making these decisions? What stakeholder groups were we soliciting information from at the time? So when you're going through, you want to have all of this information documented so that that way your future self is not asking even more questions than when you got started. And just from the sense of documentation, it is extremely fearful to start writing because you know that someone else is going to read this eventually. You're wondering, did I put too much detail? Did I put not enough detail? Was that what I was supposed to write? And honestly, you just have to start writing and worry about the rest later. Put pen to paper or fingers on keyboards and just put it all out there. As you complete more projects and you go back and you revisit your documentation more in the future, you'll start to see how you can improve your historical tracking. You'll know, hey, for anticipated results, I really need to put more details about why we chose to make this decision, because we saw in the last campaign that this actually wasn't effective. And as you continue to document, you'll see why you changed UTM parameters in the middle of the year. You know, it's not just beneficial to have good analytics to measure things, but if it's not documented, then it's not easy to go back and say, yes, we 100% hit our goal, or actually we need to change and pivot because we are somehow off track. And when you think about it, teams change extremely often. So having this documentation is going to be really helpful if you ever have to bring on new staff members to the team, because now that information is no longer locked in someone's head. They easily have a reference guide that they can go to and read up on everything that the team has been doing historically and just get caught up sooner.
And continuing with the theme of documentation, we did provide a link to a worksheet that we're going to now go through. So if you haven't already made a copy of that document to fill out for yourself, please reference the link that you see on your screen right now. I'll slow roll it here for a second to give you a chance to get that set up. But basically, we're now going to apply these principles, and we have a list of questions by sort of theme that we just reviewed. And please keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list. This is a starting point for you. And these are things that Karmel and I have gone through throughout our experience that are common threads, but that's not indicative of every possible question or scenario or use case that you may come across. And so use this as a roadmap, as a guideline to document your processes and map out the the concepts that we've just reviewed. And if you need to, feel free to add to it, adjust as you see fit, because we all have unique circumstances or initiatives that we need to address. And so this is not meant to be a set it and forget it activity. You're not to beat that drum repeatedly, but you do need to be aware that you got to be a little more flexible as you go through this.
Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and, as Chris said, if you have not already, go ahead and click on that link. It's going to take you to this document. And as we said, go ahead, clone this so that you're able to go in and modify it. We will be available via chat to answer any questions, but this is the document that we're about to go through. And so now that you have that document, we're going to go ahead and get started. The first section that we are going to go over is the process section. So as Chris said, this worksheet is designed to guide you through some of the common questions that come up in the different themes that we've talked about. So the first theme that we're going to go through is process. So some of the current questions that we have here are: who's your audience that you're targeting with your messaging? What is your call to action? Where does this campaign fall in your content schedule? What other mediums are needed to actually distribute your messaging? If you need A/B testing, what is it? What specifically are you going to test? And are there additional materials for sales that they need to use in outbound prospecting, or is this a pure marketing campaign? So these are just some of the common questions. Feel free to continue to add your own, but on the right-hand side, go ahead and we're going to set a timer for 5 minutes for you to go through and answer these. Again, Chris and I are going to be available via chat if you have any questions.
Just in case anyone out there is panicking at this very moment, if it wasn't obvious prior to starting this exercise, please focus on one campaign or initiative, not everything. So again, keep it simple.
We are about halfway done. So again, feel free to take your time, add in additional questions as needed. You don't have to answer every question that is listed here. This is meant to be a guide. And if you are getting stuck, our biggest tip is to prioritize your focus on making sure that you are using the 80-20 rule, that you're maximizing your process to capture 80% of your goal while leaving the rest of the 20%, that fringe case, to be exactly what it is, a fringe case. You'll fix it when it comes up. All right, Trailblazers, there's about 30 seconds left in our time to work through the process section. Go ahead and jot down your final thoughts before we transition to the next topic. All right, so time is up for the process section. If you did not get through everything, don't worry. This is meant for you to keep. It is working on a project that is important to you, so you are welcome to come back anytime, but we are going to go ahead and move on to the next section. And that is focusing on automation. So again, we have some questions here, some pre-made questions that are meant to help you think through this campaign that you're working on or a problem that you're trying to solve. So these are meant to be, stimulating questions to just get your mind flowing. So when thinking about automation, it's thinking about what can be automated, what should be automated, what should not be automated. And that is key. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. It is one of Chris's favorite phrases. What happens if the automation fails? Do you know how you're going to handle that? And should any of your automations ultimately lead to initiate another automation or process? So again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Try taking this time to think through all of these questions. If you have additional, feel free to jot them down. Chris and I are available in the chat. The biggest tip we can give you with automation is prioritize tasks and operations so that they're highly predictable and frequently occurring. That is our tip. But again, I'm going to go ahead and start this timer and we'll have 5 minutes on the clock. Feel free to ask us any questions in the chat. All right, folks, we have about 2.5 minutes left on the clock. Feel free to continue to ask questions in the chat window. Chris and I are here to help you. All right, Trailblazers, there's about 30 seconds left on the clock. Go ahead and put down your final thoughts. Again, Chris and I are here in the chat to answer any questions you have. This is by no means the last time you will be working on any of these. All right, that concludes our work on the automation section, which brings us to the dread Pirate Roberts of testing. That's right, that is our next section. So again, we have some pre-thought out questions for you to help you along the way when you're thinking about testing. Some of those questions include, who's testing this process? Specifically, what needs to be tested? Do you know what your scenarios are? What is the happy path method? And the happy path being, what is that scenario that you know is going to trigger the automations and the results that you're expecting? What are your edge cases? The scenarios where you're like, I can't believe someone even clicked that. Why would you think to click that? Again, do you know what the results are of the happy path and for the edge cases? And then, of course, we have to think about, what are we not testing? Is there a reason we're deciding not to test that? What assumptions are we making as we go through and test? Where in the standard testing steps can someone actually exit the entire experience and then attempt to rejoin? Do we know what that looks like if someone engages halfway and then tries to come back? Do we see the same metrics that we're expecting? And what are the different automations that are triggered within your testing steps? It's extremely important to know. Yes, you know that that button is going to trigger an automation, but does somebody else? That is key. So we are going to go ahead and again put 5 minutes back on the clock. Feel free to go through these questions. Chris and I are here in the chat to help you along. And as you think about this, remember, the theme for testing is pick only one variable to change and keep all the rest consistent. A rinse and repeat method is going to get you through almost every variation you can think of. All right, folks, we are hitting that halfway mark. I know you're wondering how could possibly 2.5 minutes already have gone by, but it is okay. There's still 2.5 minutes left. And of course, this is your document to keep. This is a tool that is going to help you in your marketing success. So if you have not answered all of the questions, don't worry. Continue to add more questions and more questions and more questions. A common theme in testing is, how do you know if you're successful if you don't know how you fail? Just food for thought. All right, Trailblazers, there's about 30 seconds left before we move on to the next section. I know you have so many questions about testing. It's okay. Keep typing them to us in the chat window. Keep writing them down in your document. Chris and I are going to continue to be here on this journey with you. Go ahead and start wrapping up before we hit on to our next section. All right, so our next section up is analytics. And so this is, of course, the most important section when it comes to the success of any campaign. And so some of the questions that we have for you in measuring your own analytics is, how do you measure success? Do sales and marketing have the same metrics that they're tracking? Probably no. But a good question to have, are these two teams aligned? And are there any other teams that should be involved in helping you make sure that this campaign is successful? Are you sure that you have very well-defined KPIs, key performance indicators? Are there any specific reports that you know that you will need, and who should actually be seeing them? This might be a hint that you can make them beforehand. And do you need a dashboard to go ahead and track all of this analytics over time so that it's kind of just already there and you get to visit it on a daily or weekly or monthly basis? And again, who's the audience that's going to be seeing this? Is it your executive team, or is it the marketing team so that they know how to pivot when they need? And are these metrics being regularly reviewed by the organization or the key stakeholders to make sure that they're still accurate and relevant? So those are just some of the questions that we have for you. We're going to go ahead again, put 5 minutes on the clock. As you continue to have questions, we are loving what we're seeing in the chat. So feel free to continue to go through, chat away at us, get those fingers typing. I know it, just do it. But we are here for you, and the timer has begun. All right, Trailblazers, we are at that halfway mark. I know, again, 5 minutes is going by so fast. So continue to ask questions. Chris and I are loving what we're seeing. So continue to ask, and I'm going to go quiet again.
And I'll stop being so quiet because really reporting and the analytics piece is so vital, but it's such a hard place to start because you don't know what you should have. So again, as we've mentioned earlier, keep it as simple as possible. Don't overthink it right now. You can revise, you can change things after the fact. Just put a line in the sand and work with it. And then if it doesn't work, change it. If it is working, lean into it. Not a big deal.
All right, we are winding down with our last 30 seconds on analytics. So go ahead and wrap this up, put in any of your final thoughts. If you want, leave some notes for yourself that are going to prompt you to come back to this and be like, that's what I was talking about, or that's the question that I had. We are going to go ahead and move on to the next section, starting in 3, 2, 1. And so we are moving on to what I'm personally going to put my touch in this, documentation, which is my favorite section. It is my ultimate favorite. Like, I love documentation way too much, but we have some questions here that are meant to help you. And I don't know if you guys happen to realize, but this entire worksheet is already your documentation. I know, isn't that like so cool how we kind of did that for you? So now for the documentation section, it's really just putting it all together and making sure that you are being really meta about your project. So like, who's going to go ahead and read this in the future? Is this meant for the marketing team? Is it meant for the executive team? Who's reading all of your notes? Where are you going to keep this held? Is there a shared drive that you guys have access to where you can keep this? Or is this something that you're locking away, only available on your computer? Which again, we've talked about the fact that documentation is meant to be shared. We should probably put it in a shared location. How is it going to be distributed? So again, how does someone else have access to this? Are there additional questions that came up during the project that you actually never had a chance to answer? So I know in working with projects a lot, sometimes you're like, oh my God, that's a really great idea. Let's do that for next time. But then somehow next time comes along and like you didn't actually remember to go back to that question. So now here's the time. Go ahead and write that in. What new information did you learn throughout this entire process? Right? It's not just about the current work that we're doing. We're constantly learning new things that are going to help us in the future. So let's go ahead and jot that down. Are there any final steps that need to be taken to test? Is there something that you can actually only do once it's 100% deployed and out there in the world? And it was just something that you couldn't cover in your initial testing. And then of course, again, who were the stakeholders on this project? That's a little different than the first question. The first question of being who reads it versus Who were the direct people who were involved in making these decisions? Who did you collaborate with? Who was that person who came in and gave you that one bright idea and then they were never seen from again? And then again, what is automated and why? This is extremely important. If you build new automation that's going to be affected by the next campaign, probably good to go ahead and note it about why you built it and what it's accomplishing for your team. So now that I've read out all of these questions to you and gave you that great commentary, we're going to go ahead and get 5 minutes back on the clock for your final section.
Just like everybody on this session, Karmel, I was completely riveted by your spiel on documentation because we all love documentation so much.
Yes, I know. People fear it. Don't fear it. This is how you get better at it. Keep writing. All right. It's my last and final 2.5 minute warning. I know. Again, how did we get through 5 minutes so quickly? Well, we didn't. We're only halfway through. So keep writing your questions. Keep chatting us. I swear these chats are beautiful and amazing. We love it. And again, as a reminder, this is not the last time that you will ever be working on this, right? This document, this worksheet is something that you are going to be able to clone time and time again to help you put your thoughts together, to help you stay organized, to keep your documentation in line. Think about it. It's so easy to just, adapt this as you continue working on projects, but we have almost 1 minute and 30 seconds left. I know I should stop talking. So keep chatting us, keep writing down all your thoughts. If you didn't answer all the questions, don't worry. You can always go back to answer them. That's what's nice about documentation is it doesn't all have to be done in one sitting, but it is good to note that if it wasn't done in one sitting, when did you make these changes? Because we're constantly learning new information and it colors the way that we actually translate information and think about it and make decisions. So if it is something that you're going to revisit, just make a note to yourself, maybe change the font color to be different to represent that, when you first started this project, it was on X date. And then when you came back and you added these questions and additional answers, it was on this date. So you can see how much time has elapsed. And has your thought process actually changed? Which, as I say this, we now only have 30 seconds left on the clock. So again, feel free, close out any final thoughts, get them down into that document, or if you're writing pen on paper, keep writing. Chris and I are here to continue answering your questions.
One thing to add to the date bit, Karmel, I think it's an underrated aspect of documentation is actually knowing when something was decided and then being able to understand what other impacts may have influenced that in the meantime.
Yes, that is key and critical. Dates are always extremely helpful. That is a great tip, Chris. Thank you. And so I've left the timer on 1 second because this was our final section. I hope that we have answered any of your questions. You'll be able to continue chatting us and keep doing it. We're going to keep answering you, but it is time to go ahead and move on.
And with that, if it wasn't obvious before, hopefully we can bring it together here. And everything we just did was really laying out our blueprint. And so we always have to start with a plan, no matter what we're doing. If you're building a car, building a house, whatever you're going to do, great to map it out and figure out where all the pieces go. And a great quote here, if you don't know why it's working when it's working, probably won't know how to fix it when it breaks. I cannot stress enough well, this is just the way it's always been. Not going to help you very much when something is no longer working because you just don't know why it's always been working. And so, start with the happy path, figure out or map out your ideal journey process, whatever it is. Keep it simple, and then you can add complexity. It's much easier to start simple and go more complex than try and peel that back. Alignment, sales, service, marketing, make sure you connect, and then refine. It is not a forever decision, but you need to start and get moving. And so no matter what you do for a blueprint design, however you document this, make sure you go back, revisit it, and just understand things can and will change. And that's why you should always have some type of review on the books to ensure we're constantly reevaluating and making sure we're adding the improvements as needed to keep moving in the right direction and hitting our marks. So with that, we do have a whole slew of resources. And so while we've been focusing on the 5 emotions, they are the team, but our star of the show is actually you. You are the star, and you're the one who needs to manage all of these different emotions as you go through your process. And so there's a whole lot of resources available that Karmel and I have put together, so you can click this link and check those out. Love to get your feedback. If we missed anything, if there's other resources you think we should add for the next time, please let us know. Happy to add it and expand our documentation and help those down the line. So lots of good stuff in there.
Yes, which brings us to our summary and concluding this entire workshop.
In summary, we're going to keep with the idea of breaking the 4th wall with our friend here. And we're going to keep our train of thought as we wrap things up here and just really quickly recap what we focused on throughout this session and what you should carry on as you apply these ideas and methodologies to your own campaigns and initiatives. And that is starting with defining and mapping out cohesive processes, putting together thoughtful automations. Let's not be too fearful of testing. Testing is a good thing. Does not have to be a disgusting experience. We can make it better. We can make it more efficient. And if you don't enjoy it, okay, get over it. You still got to do it. And then Really putting some thought into our analytics, our benchmarks, our KPIs, so that we can get some meaningful insights, not just for me, but for everybody. It is a collaborative effort, so it's really good to make sure you have everyone involved that you need for that. And then documentation. We know it's a page turning experience going through documentation. So keep in mind, start simple, add on. Nobody wants to read a novel, but documentation is your friend. Do not be afraid of it.
Yes. And again, with breaking the fourth wall, this workshop and that worksheet is your documentation. Don't overthink it. We tried to set it up as best for you as possible. Go through, and if it was very helpful, keep cloning it, keep using it, make it part of every campaign so that no matter what, you are overly successful and you will always have the answers because you wrote it down.
All right.
And so in closing, again, I am one of your co-hosts, Karmel James.
And I am Chris Zullo.
And if it wasn't already clear from our entire presentation, hi, I'm Joy.
And I'm angry.
And so here we have our Trailblazer IDs and our Twitter handles. Feel free to tweet us, to reach out to us. We are happy to answer any questions that you have. As Chris said, we do have a list of resources that are available to you, but we're also a resource. Thank you so much for this time. We really appreciate you all being here and the questions that we've seen, and we hope that you have enjoyed this workshop.